Brand disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed by individuals on this platform, the callers plus invited guests, are their own. The information you hear does not reflect the overall views of all parties associated with this brand. We encourage everyone to research all things heard live or via archive for edification purposes. Discretion is advised.
Don't touch that dial. You're now listening to Debate Talk Free Radio.
Help keep the show on the air. If you want to help, you can send a donation to PayPal. The email is DT4U@gmail.com or through Cash App, $SALSHOWTIME. Thanks for your support.
Peace. What it is, it's your brother Tyvon Swain, L, a.k.a. the Orthodox, Moor, a.k.a. the Seven Pillar Saracen. And this is Debate Talk for You Live. Happy Friday, family. I hope everyone's doing well, wherever you're at. It's been a busy week, family. It's been a crazy week. A lot's been going on. We got woke churches going up against evangelical churches calling people evangelifish. We got vocab going at Dante Fortson. We got people going at Brother Barin, etc. It's been a crazy. But before I get into everything, family, I want to announce a debate that has been set up for October the 26th real quick. Let me get this up there for everyone to see. So Vocab Malone will be going up against Sam Addison Monday, October the 26th. And the topic of that debate will be, does the Bible teach justification, sola fide, by faith alone? One more time. On Monday, October 26th, we will have Vocab Malone going up against Sam Addison. And they will be debating the topic, does the Bible teach justification, sola fide, by faith alone? We are still working out the times for that, but we got the date set up. Both parties have agreed to the date. I will be moderating that debate. I'm looking forward to that debate. It should be a very good debate. Both brothers are sharp. It's a good topic, and I think a lot of people are going to enjoy that debate, including myself. But yeah, getting into it, y'all see the title, y'all see what it is. I'm going to lead off with a question and end with the same question. I'm not going to answer the question now. I'm going to let it be rhetorical, but I'm going to bring it back up at the end of this conversation. I'm going to speak for a little bit. Then I'm going to drop the link to a few people, maybe into the chat, see if we can't get a conversation started or whatnot. But definitely, family, this has been an interesting week. And I'm going to start off the conversation by asking everyone a question. For all the Bible believers out there, etc., whatnot, do you think that slavery in America was a sin for the nation of America and a sin that it needs to repent from? One more time. So do you think that slavery in America was a sin for the nation of America that the nation needs to repent from? I got my own opinions on that, and I will be getting into that. But first, I want to touch on a little back and forth between Pastor Jeff Durbin and what people perceive to be a back and forth between him and Eric Mason, where Jeff Durbin, he gives a sermon going at the woke church. And so instantaneously, the imagery is given that he's taking shots at Eric Mason and whatnot. So I was listening to people talk about how, I went and watched the video myself, and I'm about to play it here. I watched the whole sermon, but I was listening to people talking about like, oh yeah, well, like, so for instance, I was watching Brother Barin's channel on Barin TV. Shout out to Brother Barin. That was you've had some very interesting shows and conversations recently that I think a lot of people should pay attention to, and whether they agree with you or don't agree with you, they're conversations that people need to hear. I was hearing people talking about like, so on that channel, Vocab Malone was going to Dante Fortune and a few other people and whatnot. And there was some conversation about how the people believed that Jeff Durbin was saying that Eric Mason was a pimp from the pulpit or whatnot, and calling him all kind of names and whatnot, and calling him some names I won't repeat here. There's some language that's used in if somebody was saying that I can't repeat here on Debate Talk for You, and I'm going to do my best to mitigate that when I show some clips or whatnot. However, people felt very strongly about the language that Jeff Durbin was using against Eric Mason. So I went back, or what they thought was Eric Mason. So I went back and I watched the video, and I saw something very interesting that I definitely want to talk about. Wherein for most people, from the Black community would listen to that speech and hear direct shots to Eric Mason. I think most European evangelicals would listen to that speech and not hear a single shot at Eric Mason, which is why I wanted to have this conversation, because I thought that joint was interesting. I heard a lot of what would be considered to be dog whistles by some, and I heard to be a lot of what would be tone deafness by what some people would consider to be tone deafness. You know what I'm saying? And so yeah, I wanted to open up that conversation a little bit and really peel back some layers on that onion, so a lot of people can maybe have a broader understanding of what was being said, how it was being said, the delivery, the crowd, the reception from certain people, et cetera, whatnot. But if y'all can hear me in the chat and everything's going real well, hit me with the 1 right quick so I know everything's working right. I would appreciate just a single solitary 1 from somebody watching. You know what? I'm just going to rock with them anyway. So I'm going to share part of the sermon by Jeff Durbin and talk about part of this right quick. Hold up, excuse me, wrong one. Oh, I didn't share my audio. Hold on, family. My fault. Haven't streamed in a week and I'm a bit out of touch. There we go. So I'm gonna play this one first about the woke church, and then I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna play this bit about Black Lives Matter. There's just 2 different clips. He swears in one of them. Sal, if I don't catch it, please forgive me.
We need to say what the prophets said and do what the prophets did. I want to be very careful about what I'm about to do, because I want you to understand why. Say what the prophets said and do what the prophets did. The rules in my house, you can ask my children, the rules in my house, a foul mouth is punished severely. My children never grew up in a house with a father with a foul mouth or was loose with his lips. If I was to curse in front of my children would be shocked. And I praise God for that, because before God saved me, I had a terrible, terrible mouth. It came from a wicked heart. It was constant. And God redeemed me. And one of the first things he did is he changed the way that I spoke. You can ask for references from my family or my church body. But we have to understand that there are different speed limits in different locations for a reason. One of the things one of my heroes, Doug Wilson, says is that there's a speed limit for the highway and a speed limit for the sidewalk. They're not the same for a reason. You have to be more aggressive in the one lane. Jesus shows us this as well. We know that Jesus was known as a friend of sinners. He loved tax collectors and prostitutes. People knew it. He hung out with them to the degree that he was slandered. People were calling him a drunkard and a glutton. But put Jesus into a fight, and Jesus, when dealing with spiritually dangerous things, Jesus tells the truth in hard ways. He used the serrated edge. Jesus calls people sons of hell. Jesus talks about people as whitewashed tombs, people full of dead, rotting corpses. You are dead. Jesus confronted people and warned them about hell. Jesus always told the truth. And when put Jesus into a fight, read Matthew 23, the meek and mild, sweet Jesus isn't there. He is confronting people who are endangering people's souls. I'll give you another example of how the prophets say things and how they do things. If you don't know this, I encourage you to get to know it. I think our evangelifish culture has lost sight of this. But this is how Ezekiel speaks about God's harlot wife. He says, Ezekiel 16:23, and after all your wickedness, woe, woe to you, declares the Lord God. You built yourself a vaulted chamber. This is what he's talking to his people. And made yourself a lofty place in every square. At the head of every street, you built your lofty place and made your beauty an abomination, offering yourself to any passerby and multiplying your whoring. You also played the whore with the Egyptians, your lustful neighbors, multiplying your whoring to provoke me to anger. Behold, therefore, I stretched out my hand against you and diminished your allotted portion and delivered you to the greed of your enemies. How sick, God says in verse 30, is your heart, declares the Lord God, because you did all these things, the deeds of a brazen prostitute, building your vaulted chamber at the head of every street and making your lofty place in every square. Yet you were not like a prostitute because you scorned payment. Did you catch that? He says you're different than other whores because you didn't even want to get paid. Adulterous wife who receives strangers instead of her husband. Men give gifts to all prostitutes, but you gave your gifts to all your lovers, bribing them to come to you from every side with your whorings. So you were different from other women in your whorings. No one solicited you to play the whore, and you gave payment while no payment was given to you. Therefore, you were different. That's powerful. Serrated edge, God telling the truth about a bride who goes and offers herself to all the pagan nations, but doesn't even receive a payment back. She's just multiplying her whorings, going out to all the pagan nations. So in light of these issues, BLM, LGBT, and the abortion issue, evangelifish, woke pastors, you say homo lust is not a sin, even though Jesus said sin begins in the heart. You say we aren't under law, we're under grace. We don't need God's stipulated standards of justice. Yet you throw up your Marxist communist fists shouting, no justice, no peace. You swallowed the member of the Marxist, denying what God says about our unity and identity in the Messiah, and you teach people that our identity is in our color. Shame on you. You deny God's own word, accusing people of guilt for the sinful color of their ancestors. Thus, you invalidate the word of God for the sake of your woke bullshit.
I missed this out, my fault.
This, by the way, more Pauline, if you like. You invalidate it for the sake of your scubala. Or I think if I want to be faithful and I want to say what the prophets say and do what they did, I need to be more like Ezekiel. The woke evangelical whore is a slut who lies down in the middle of a burning city, spreading her legs to the rioters and looters, spreading her legs to Marx, Engels, Alinsky, and Soros. Only she knows the history. Marxism and communism plunges nations into poverty. There's no money in this for her, but she wasn't looking for payment anyways. The evangelical woke slut is a slut whose behavior makes Cardi B's WAP look like performance art for preschoolers. Pray that God removes these pimps from the pulpit and fills it with prophets who will keep his bride pure and faithful. Let's pray. Using people.
Yeah, so my fault, Sal. I missed it. You know what I'm saying? That's my fault. Completely. I had it timed out. But I was slower hitting it on the YouTube than I thought I'd be. But yeah, that was an interesting little bit there. I saw a lot of people get hot at that, so I went back and watched the whole thing, and I thought it was interesting because immediately when I heard the concept, when he said the woke church, and they started talking about the LGBT issue, I was like, whoa. So before I saw this sermon, I had never read the book The Woke Church by Eric Mason. So I heard this sermon and I bought the book, and I started reading the book, and I was expecting to see Eric Mason co-sign on gays being cool in the church, etc., whatnot, and the LGBT issues and whatnot. But that's not what I found. I didn't find any language in there of a sort, which shocked me. I was shocked right off the top. I was like, wait a minute. Like, that seems kind of sloppy to title something. It says Jeff Durbin confronts the woke church. I was like, okay, that's like right off the top. I'm looking at the title of the man's book, and I'm like, okay, this seems like he's talking directly to Eric Mason. Okay, what's going on? And so when I hear him talking about like embracing the LGBT concept, I'm like, okay, you're talking about like progressive Christianity. This is a concept to where there's churches out there that have that believe that you can be gay and Christian, etc. It's just it's real accepting and whatnot, real liberal, etc. Whatnot. But that's not what I saw. In fact, I saw something to the opposite. Like I went to go double check because I didn't see it in the book. And so I went to Twitter, and I saw that Eric Mason had put this tweet up on June 27th of 2015. And this has to do with the Supreme Court's decision to uphold gay marriage and whatnot. So Dr. Eric Mason tweeted out, it is both possible to deeply love homosexuals and disagree with the Supreme Court's decision and stand on a biblical view of marriage. So I didn't see that lining up with the progressive Christianity that I heard alluded to in this woke church sermon. So immediately I was like, okay, is Jeff talking to Eric Mason, or is he talking to the progressive Christian movement and whatnot? And so when I replayed the video, I heard him start off by talking about like, yeah, if my kids heard me cuss, etc., it'd be a weird thing, whatnot, because when I became Christian, God took my foul mouth from me. I was like, cool, got you. And I noticed that there's kids in the crowd. And so when he cusses and talks about the wokeness concept, I'm like, okay, no, that's calculated. That's premeditated. You knew you were going to get up in front of a crowd of people and there's going to be kids in the crowd, and you were going to cuss. You knew you were going for that surprising moment to catch people off guard in your speech and your sermon and whatnot. And so, I'm like, no, okay. So you definitely you're not saying the woke church and not understanding that it's talking about Eric Mason. Also, because this man speaking is Jeff Durbin, he is Dr. James White's son-in-law. And so Dr. James White has directly talked about Eric Mason and his book, The Woke Church, on his platform or whatnot. So it would be highly unlikely that Jeff Durbin would be using the woke church and not understand that it also addresses Eric Mason. So immediately I'm like, okay, like, so he's definitely an intelligent individual, and he's intelligent enough to understand that he needs to preface him swearing in front of a crowd of people that has children in it by telling an anecdotal story about him swearing in front of his children and whatnot. Got you. So when I see him muddy up the conversation about the woke church and BLM and Marxism and abortion and what he comes out here and he talks about the fact that that these woke churches back the homosexuality movement in the church or whatnot, then I'm like, yo, there's something that's weird there. I'm not understanding that. That seems a lot of the way off to me. Like I heard people talking about like being like offended about the fact that they called him, or they felt like Eric Mason was being called a pimp and a whore, right? So yeah, that would have offended me also. And as a matter of fact, it did offend me because as I read it, as I listen to it, Jeff Durbin is definitely talking to both groups. He's talking to Eric Mason, and he's also talking to the progressive Christian movement. He's doing it in a very slick way, and I'm not offended at him going at people like that. Like I'm offended that you just don't do it. He just didn't do it straight up, and I'm offended for in the fact that the people he's talking to most likely have not read the book The Woke Church. So if they see the book The Woke Church, they're going to assume it starts co-signing the LGBT concept in the way that he's rightly calling out the Black Lives Matter group for, because Black Lives Matter, like they openly embrace the LGBT concept, even to the point where they say that they will elevate trans I don't even know how to properly say it, trans women, where it's men pretending to be women or whatnot, or identifying as women, etc. whatnot. You can obviously see how I deal with it, because I don't even, to me, you're biologically male or female. It just is what it is. However, I found this to be extremely, extremely interesting, right? All the way around, because I saw lines being drawn in the sand where it did not seem to be necessary to draw lines in the sand. So let's say, for instance, I don't agree with Eric Mason completely on his belief system, nor do I agree with Jeff Durbin completely on his belief system. There's things we agree on, there's things we disagree on. However, we all believe in the same God, and we all have the same basic belief system. So, for instance, in a society where, for instance, we see similar injustices happening or whatnot, there's certain things we should be able to work on together, right? We're not going to agree on everything, but there's what we do agree on. We should be able to work on that, right? So, for instance, let's say I disagree with gay marriage or whatnot. I just showed you where, and I'll do it again. I just showed you where Eric Mason disagreed with the Supreme Court's ruling. Again, this is his tweet from June 27, 2015, 6 a.m. It is both possible to deeply love homosexuals and disagree with the Supreme Court's decision and stand on a biblical view of marriage. Okay, so he's not down with the Supreme Court's ruling on that. Neither am I, right? I'm not down with it whatsoever. I'm not down with it because on the tail end of that ruling, it literally made it to where the transgender thing happened to where. So let me explain it like this. So when the Supreme Court ruled that you could have same-sex marriages, they redefined a word. They didn't create same-sex unions. They redefined what the word marriage meant. As a legal term, marriage meant matrimony. Matrimony means the rights of the mother. Marriage legally was a union that could produce children, right? And then there's rights of heredity, etc., that are attached to that and whatnot. And so same-sex marriages are not, or same-sex unions cannot produce children. They're not the same thing as a marriage in that regard. They don't produce heredity, etc., whatnot. And so they literally redefined the concept to where people who can't have children are now, or in their union, are now defined the same as people who can. And so this has, and we've seen this already, this has had a large set of unintended consequences, and some would say intended consequences, in terms of how the transgender part has been played into the whole thing, in the sense that we're like, now you're seeing like the bathroom issue in high schools, etc., via like people identifying to where like, okay, if you identify as a female, you can be biologically male and now go into a female's locker room, etc., bathroom, etc., whatnot. And I was telling people like, so for me, I deeply disagree with this in the sense that we're like, so in my belief system, I'm not allowed to get undressed around someone of the opposite sex, etc., and whatnot, right? And for my family, it'd be the same thing, right? And so in the school system, they're saying, okay, well, you just have to, you have to segregate, you have to segregate as someone with a religious belief, and you have to separate yourself. Me, I got an issue with that, right? But I would assume that Jeff Durbin also has an issue with that. So me, Jeff Durbin, and Eric Mason should all be able to work together on combating the consequences of the gay marriage concept, of the Supreme Court ruling. Not just the gay marriage concept, but the consequences of the Supreme Court ruling and how it plays out in society. However, that's not what's done here. What's done here is there's a line drawn in the sand, right? And it says, if you're an evangelical, if you go near anything that says woke, that's bad. Woke, bad. Woke equals bad. So if you see anybody in the black church talking about the woke church or anything of that nature, bad. Now, did he say that? No. That last part, no. Is that the picture painted that everyone in the crowd sees? Yeah. 100%. So now you got two churches, right, that agree on the same thing, but now they can't work together because there's lines being drawn for no reason whatsoever. Now, I'm not in the church in any way, shape, or form. I'm not a Christian, right? I've got a lot of family that's still in the church, though. A lot of family still in the church. And I got family who deals with mixed churches and whatnot, right? So I know a lot of people are being torn right now. That's why I'm talking about this, because there's no need for the, like, so if you're supposed to be fellow believers in the same concept, right? Or at least similar concepts. I'm assuming that Eric Mason and Jeff Durbin are similar enough as Christians to where they're going to fight over little stuff like, oh, is the rapture pre-tribulation? Is it post-tribulation? The little stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? Nothing major, right? I'm pretty sure they believe on very similar concepts of the Bible, Jesus, salvation, etc. They might have small doctrinal beliefs differences that ends in isms and whatnot, but whatever, got you. At the end of the day, they're both Christians. At the end of the day, they're both Christians. So why can't they work together to get stuff done that they agree upon? When I see that, I immediately start thinking, okay, there's motives here I don't understand or I'm not aware of, etc. whatnot. But it looks funny to me. It looks 100% funny to me. It looks 100% funny to me. Particularly when you get into Eric Mason's book or whatnot. So this isn't, I'm not trying to do like an advertisement for his book or whatnot, but I am going to show something real quick just to try to explain what I'm talking about. So I'm going to share my screen one more time. Sorry, family, I got to keep sharing my screen individually so I can do it a certain way so I can see what's going on in the back as I run the show or whatnot. So this is the table of contents for Eric Mason's book, Woke Church, an urgent call. Hold on, let me do it like this so you can see the full title of it. Woke Church, an urgent call for Christians in America to confront racism and injustice. All right, to confront racism and injustice. So when you look inside that joint, hit the table of contents. You see part 1. The church should already be woke. How big is the gospel? We're family, we're holy. Is the church asleep? Things for the church to lament. reclaiming our prophetic voice, a vision for change, the woke church in action, seeing through the lens of the end, etc. Whatnot. I don't see the chapter on progressive Christianity. I don't see it. I don't see it. So I'm going to say this. Hopefully people like Jeff Durbin are mistaken, right? Like I said, they seem to be too intelligent to me to be mistaken. But let's just say they are mistaken, right? I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to personally ask you, Jeff Durbin, little on me, Ty Vance would know, little nobody on Debate Talk for You, to clear this up for the people. If you do not mean the woke church in terms of Eric Mason or whatnot, then clear it up. Just like you went public and do all kind of videos or whatnot to talk about certain things or whatnot. Let's do a video on this, clear it up. Because it doesn't make any sense that you have an issue with working with somebody like him on a matter that you should agree on, i.e. stuff like gay marriage and stuff, etc. Whatnot. If you both don't support the Supreme Court decision, why can't you work together? Do you understand that making videos like you just made makes it to where you can't work together? It would seem as if you want to combat those kind of consequences of the Supreme Court ruling in society, that you would want to link up with as many like-minded people as possible in order to get your political movement going, right? And that goes into the next part. I want to share another video that where he goes into the Black Lives Matters and Marxism concept, right? Because he again, when you hear the whole sermon, he talks about the woke church at the end of it. So everything culminates and builds up to that last bit I just showed you there, in terms of the video I played for Jeff Durbin of Jeff Durbin. So when you get up to that last part, he's already talked about the Black Lives Matter. He's talked about cultural Marxism. He's talked about intersectionality. He's talked about abortion. He's talked about LGBT. He's talked about a whole bunch of things, right? And then it seems like he throws it all on the woke church concept or whatnot, right? And so, he also talks about, the critical race theory or whatnot, which to me is extremely interesting. I'm going to play this clip and then I'm going to break that part down, because I found that to be there needs to be conversation as to why, even for people like James White and Jeff Durbin, etc., whatnot, even if you don't agree with critical race theory, why it's off the table as a conversation, meaning the concept of institutional racism or something like that, right? Institutional discrimination, etc., whatnot, right? Why is discussing that off the table? That's right. That right there is right next to my question of, is America, or was slavery in America a sin that the nation has to repent from? That's right there. You know what I'm saying? But let me do this one more time. Now this one, I know he doesn't swear.
Yeah, I love reminding people that it's not the role of the media to endorse candidates.
Look at me. I keep not.
Are you looking for analysis of the 2020 election based on actual...
I keep not sharing my audio.
...facts and policies?
Sorry, family.
Well, take a look at this.
Hey,
Our team of...
Calm down. Easy there, sir. There we go. So Jeff Durbin gives this bit before he talks about
I like that.
Before he talks about the woke church concept.
But let's just talk about worldview issues in terms of Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. It's amazing when you hear that being shouted in the streets. The average Christian seeing the flames and the cocktails being thrown, hears Black Lives Matter and goes...
And to be clear, I might have to play this one a couple of times and I might pause this up and go back a few times because there's so much in this 8 minutes, 9 minutes that there's a lot to cover just here, right? And the fact that it's done this way to where like there's so much meat packed in before you get into the woke church part, like that part I really want to touch on because the people's brains are just getting crammed full of stuff here. And he even tells you at the beginning of the sermon, like, I got so much to cram in within just an hour. You know what I'm saying? And you'll see what I'm talking about here. There's a lot just thrown out just in this 9 minutes. So please pay attention and no worries. If you got any questions about what you're hearing, throw it in the chat. We'll go back to it, etc., whatnot. But I'm going to do my best to try to touch on what I think is pertinent from these 9 minutes. Ooh.
But let's just talk about worldview issues in terms of Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. It's amazing when you hear that being shouted in the streets. The average Christian seeing the flames and the cocktails being thrown, hears Black Lives Matter and goes, I like that. Because I think they do. Because I have a worldview that makes sense about that claim. Black Lives Mattering. I like that. Makes sense in the biblical worldview. I don't know why they're saying it. And maybe they're saying it in a different way than I would mean it. Because of their worldview. And it actually is the case. Many of you guys are aware of the fact. Just go to the official website of Black Lives Matter. They confess and rejoice over the fact that they are trained Marxists. Trained Marxists. Talking about Black Lives Matter. Now, if you know the history of Marxism and you hear them talking about anything, you should be a little squinty-eyed. Trained Marxists. They rejoice in this, that they are not just Marxists, but trained Marxists. It makes sense as to why we're seeing what we're seeing, by the way. If you know the history of Marxism, you say, okay, now I'm starting to understand a little bit better. You see, trained Marxists understand that they bring about their revolution. And by the way, revolution for the Marxist isn't getting back to the foundation, something that is true or objectively true, getting back to that point, as many early on in the war for independence would have said, there's truth out there, there's justice out there. We need to get back to that foundation. Revolutionaries in the Marxist sense are trying to get away from the foundation, objective truth. They're trying to create disorder. And so, of course, trained Marxists in history have all been all about class conflict. Class conflict. Now, if you know the history of Marxism, you'll know that as they tried to get it into America early on, they did what they did before, and they tried to have it the rich versus the poor. The rich versus the poor. One problem, though, in a capitalistic society that's benefited from the Christian worldview, when you have people that are benefiting from the free market and private property and they're actually able to eat, it's hard to pit rich versus poor, so it didn't work out so well. So more class conflict is instituted. So what do we have in American history? Well, the Marxists get here and they say, let's create class conflict, rich versus poor. All right, let's also create the class conflict, gay versus straight. You know, by the way, that they've stated this plainly in their materials. You can read it. Read Saul Alinsky and all the rest. You'll see that this has been planned for the longest time. What you're seeing is the result of labor and work and consistency with their worldview, and shame on us for not fighting back sooner. Why is it they don't even know Jesus? They believe that all they are is matter and motion, and they're willing to die for what they believe. What are we doing? What are we doing? Shame on us. But they believe in a worldview called dialectical materialism. I cannot even begin to unpack this absurdity before you today. But they believe in dialectical materialism. What you need to understand at the bottom of this is their worldview claims the claims of essentially evolution, matter in motion. Dialectical materialism for the trained Marxist in Black Lives Matter is they believe in a materialist view of reality. It's matter in motion. It's stuff moving around. No God, no purpose, no order. You are matter. That's their position. And in terms of the dialectical part, don't get lost in this. I know all this is stupid. Don't get lost in this, but I know in terms of the dialectical, we say, what does that mean? I'm going to read to you Engels, a quote from Engels, so you get an idea, and I want you to consider the answer the fool according to their folly. They say, we need to do this. These lives matter. Black lives matter. Black lives matter. No justice, no peace. Well, that's interesting for matter and motion to be making claims like that. Engels said, quote, for dialectical philosophy, nothing is final, absolute, sacred. I'm going to give you just 5 seconds to think about that. Do you hear it? Answer the fool according to their folly. Engels says about dialectical philosophy, nothing is final, absolute, or sacred. Is that absolutely true? Is that final? But notice the sacred part. Nothing is final, nothing is absolute, nothing is sacred. For dialectical materialists, there are no absolutes and nothing is sacred. So, let's test it. Black lives matter? Nothing is final, nothing is absolute, nothing is sacred. We're trained Marxists. Black lives matter. No, they don't. Not according to your position. Not according to a position that says nothing is final, nothing is absolute, nothing is sacred. Also, bigger question here, we need to ask the Black Lives Matter crowd, why does matter matter? Why does matter matter? You see, where's the borrowed capital here? We can say to the Black Lives Matter Marxist, you're not supposed to believe that that black man's in the image of God. You're not supposed to believe that he has value and purpose and that black people are sacred. That's my worldview. I get to say that black people are sacred. I get to say that they're valuable because I have Christ. You have matter in motion, dialectical materialism. Matter doesn't matter in your worldview. It's borrowed capital. No creator-creation distinction in dialectical materialism. Humans are cosmic accidents. And what happens in this indifferent universe to people with black skin is irrelevant in their worldview and their perspective. What are they doing? They're sneaking over that foot, borrowing from Jesus in order to make coherent claims about their worldview, but they can't make it coherent. Here's the claim. Anything mattering is mine. Why? Because I have Jesus. I have a foundation to make sense of a world where I can say anything matters at all, or that human beings are valuable at all. You see, in my worldview, and this has been said before, but please hear it, there is one creator, God, one race, human, one blood, red, one problem, sin, and one solution, Jesus Christ. And I think a potent question to ask the Black Lives Matter Marxist, all Black Lives Matter? All Black Lives Matter? What about those black lives in the womb? The most unsafe place for black lives isn't the back of a police cruiser. It isn't even in Chicago. The most unsafe place for black lives is in the wombs of black mothers. Is that the truth?
Sir, quick, what's the captain's favorite type of cookie? Cap's got a sweet tooth. What?
Yeah. When I heard that last one, that the most dangerous place for a black life is in the womb of a black woman, I was like, okay. I was at that juncture, I was concerned because Either that's a calculated tone deafness or that's ignorant tone deafness. Either or, it's dangerous to be spewing that level of tone deafness on a microphone in a church where children can hear you. Where children can hear you. Because he didn't, again, Chicago's not the most dangerous place for a black life. The inner city, you know what I'm saying? The dangerous inner city, you know what I'm saying? He didn't say a war zone. He didn't say that, like he said, not the back of a police cruiser. He said the womb of a black woman, which is dangerous rhetoric for people who want to do dangerous things. However, again, let's say I am with that pro-life movement, because again, when you understand Jeff Durbin, he's heavily involved. If you look at the bottom left of that video, you can see there's a website, End Abortion Now, where he heavily pushes the anti-abortion movement to where they're trying to make abortion illegal and whatnot, right? Criminalize it, okay, is what they say, criminalize it and whatnot, right? Now, if he came out and was saying something that the most targeted life, right, is the black life in the womb of the black woman, he would have been able to take that rhetoric and gone to a black church and be like, okay, let's work together to get the Planned Parenthoods out of your community, whatnot, because obviously they're targeting your community more than they're targeting mine. But that's not the language he used. He wasn't using language to build a bridge. He wasn't saying, yeah, the most targeted life is a black life in the womb of a black woman. Again, it's not black women building the Planned Parenthood. It's not the black women who are giving it federal funds and whatnot. Oh, give me 2 seconds, family. My fault. Small intermission for the moment. Sorry about that, family. Had to answer my door right quick. But yeah, like, so for instance, okay, so anybody who knows Alizar from Sakari, he's from Tacoma, Washington. He and I are both from a same neighborhood called Hilltop, right? I was in Hilltop once at a community center doing a fundraiser to keep it open, right? And literally, in the view of the community center is the coldest. This is how the buildings are work. They work in, right? So you have a police station, an empty police station, a vacant police station, basically. You have a McDonald's, and you have a Planned Parenthood across from the community center where the children play. Okay. That's what my neighborhoods was looking like. You know what I'm saying? Like, Jeff Durbin's neighborhood doesn't look like that. So when he talks about the concept of critical race theory, again, critical race theory is the concept of whether you agree with it or disagree with it, it's the concept of institutional discrimination, right? Institutional discrimination. when our neighborhoods are looking different like that, and again, if I'm a kid growing up in that neighborhood or whatnot, right? I'm used to seeing that option there. I'm used to seeing that concept there. It's as normal as McDonald's. It's as normal as the police station. If your kids aren't growing up in that situation, it's not as normal to them. It's literally just that simple. And so if your rhetoric is, well, and this is what it sounds like. I'm not saying this is what the man said, but this is what it sounds like. It sounds like, well, it's your fault that there's that you're killing so many of your own kids, and to one extent, I don't disagree. When it comes to choice, everyone has their own choice, and people make their own choice on the matter, right? However, what I'm saying is some people have a different set of options than others that are more normal. That are more normal. Again, when I grow up walking past the Planned Parenthood to go get some chicken nuggets and some French fries and whatnot, that it's more normal for me than it is if in your neighborhood you don't walk past the Planned Parenthood to get to the McDonald's or whatnot. That's just, it is what it is. That's real life for people, right? Real life for people. So why, if it's really important to me to end abortion and to say that Black lives are sacred to me, I show that by using different rhetoric and breaking down. You know what? They're the most targeted life is the Black life in the womb of the Black woman, and explaining the different people or the different entities and groups, and if you want to keep it religious, right? If you want to keep it Christian, again, I'm not even Christian. If you want to keep it Christian, talk about demonic forces attacking, or Satan using demonic forces to attack the Black life and the Black woman, whatnot. But that's not what's going on. That's not what's going on. And even if you go check out their website for the End Abortion Now, that's not what they're talking about. That's not what they're talking about in the least. So, one, I find the rhetoric 100% ignorant and potentially disingenuous. Now, for me, again, I'm making the call that I think that it's on purpose. I don't think that I think it's calculated tone deafness, to me, which is dangerous. To me, which is dangerous, because that means you don't. I have to question. At that juncture, I have to question what you really believe at that juncture, because again, not only am I using the rhetoric of making it sound like Black people are targeting their own children or whatnot, right? Like targeting their own children. I'm also using rhetoric that. So again, this is what I'm saying. Like, so I played this clip second so you can understand what was building up to that first clip, right? So he's talking about the Marxism. He's talking about the Black Lives Matter. He's talking about what was the other term he used? Dialectical materialism, right? And so when he starts talking about that and the trained Marxist and whatnot, and then moves into the woke church concept, by the end of that conversation, if I'm in the crowd, I'm equating the concept of the woke church and Marxist, whether he intends it or not. And this is why ignorant rhetoric is dangerous. Because let's say Jeff Durbin does not believe what I'm saying in terms of, like, he did not mean to equate Marxist and the woke church, i.e. Eric Mason, right? Because let's say he did mean to do that. It's still being painted in the mind of the people who are listening, so that's dangerous. Let's say he did mean to do that. It's dangerous because he's getting people to conflate the woke church in a book calling for the church to address racial inequality and racism, etc., and racial injustices and whatnot, and equating that to progressive Christianity backing like the LGBT concept and also the Black Lives Matter movement, which is Marxist and does back things that many people in the Black church don't back. Many people in the Black church don't back. I literally have yet to run into another person of African descent that actually does back Black Lives Matter. Most people I know recognize that it's bought and paid for by by outside people that do not have the best interest of our community at heart. Hold on, I want to put this up right quick. Yeah, check this out. He sounds more like someone spewing Trump talking points rather than a pastor. See, that struck me as well, right? In the sense to where it sounded at one point, it sounded more like a political rally than it sounded like a sermon, right? There was too many isms in there. There was way too, like, I gotta read Solinsky. I gotta read about dialectical materialism. I gotta read about cultural Marxism. Like, yo, this sounds like a social course in college or something like that, right? This does not sound like a sermon to me, and that's why I'm saying this because this type of rhetoric is dangerous in its ignorance. Is dangerous in its ignorance because, again, by the end of the sermon, people are equating everything he's saying to the woke church, and subconsciously to Eric Mason. So again, I'm calling for my for Jeff Durbin. If you did not mean for all those things to be lined up and equated to Eric Mason, you need to clarify that for the people that you were talking to. Because what you just did is you drew all kind of lines in the sand between Christians. And again, I'm not even Christians. I'm not even a Christian, but you drew lines in the sand between Christians to where they can't work together on things that they agree on. To me, that's not when you're saying that Black lives are sacred to me because I have Christ, that doesn't even equate to me. I don't even understand how that makes sense to you. Particularly when matter of fact, I'm about to get into this whole one right here, right? To where we're talking about reparations and all that. So again, if you can go through this entire sermon, okay, from Jeff Durbin, it's a little bit over an hour long, right? But you can go through the entire sermon. He talks forever about Black Lives Matter, Marxism, the world church, etc., whatnot, right? Does not spend a single solitary, like not even 10 seconds talking about slavery. Not at all. Not talking about not addressing any racial injustice whatsoever that is brought up in the book, The Woke Church or Woke Church by Eric Mason, right? He doesn't address anything from the book, right? So again, this is why I'm saying it's dangerous, because if you're not going to address the information from the book, but you're going to use the book title in your sermon, that's problematic, because the people who are listening to you are, let's say they run into the book, they're going to assume you read the book as the pastor and assume that you're not being the blind leading the blind and having them go straight into a pit. Now, everybody within the sound of my voice knows that the average churchgoer, and again, I'm talking about my people, and again, I'm talking about myself. I used to go to church. I grew up in the church, right? Churchgoers don't have the time to fact check everything their pastor is saying. Particularly, they're not going to read like a whole, like he mentioned all kind of books right there, topics to read on, right? He's not going to, most churchgoers ain't got the time to read like extra books outside of the Bible from church. They got the regular 9 to 5s, wife and kids, husband and kids to deal with, you know what I'm saying? So when you're hearing all this rhetoric about Marxism, this blah, blah, cool, you're going to watch the news, you're going to listen to your pastor, and you're going to develop an opinion on that. You're not going to read, if you got the time to read all these extra books, you'd be the pastor, right? You're not getting paid like the pastor's getting paid. You ain't got time to read like that, right? So you're trusting what he's saying. So you're assuming the average individual is going to assume, okay, this is the information that's in woke church. And again, I read off the table of contents to you. That's not what's being mentioned in the book like that. And again, I stand to be corrected. If Eric Mason is talking about back in the LGBT concept in that book, please let me know. I stand to be corrected. I don't want to spew any ignorant rhetoric. I got the book and I haven't seen it there yet. But yeah, it's real telling in the sense to where there's lines being drawn in the sand that don't need to be drawn. that don't need to be drawn. So I'm going to share another video right quick. And this is from Dr. James White. Again, this is the father-in-law of Jeff Durbin. Okay, so this is why the rhetoric is dangerous to me, because you see James White directly dealing with Eric Mason. So I know Jeff Durbin knows who Eric Mason is and who in this book, Woke Church, etc. Right? So one more time. And I want you to hear this conversation through the lens of what Jeff Durbin just said about Black lives are sacred to me. I get to use that argument. You don't, BLM. Or so-called woke church. You don't get to use that. Right? He didn't say the woke church part, but again, when you're listening to the whole sermon and you're in the crowd, it all gets blended into one for you. That's the point I'm making right there. So hold on, let me do this here. Let me do that there.
If I'm honest about, reparations over the years, I haven't thought a lot about it as much as I would have liked to, as one of.
Oh, where'd you go? Oh, that's my computer being janky. My fault, family.
The outworkings of what it looks like to kind of fix things and deal with some of the racial tensions in our country. I started thinking about it a few years back when I was asked to speak on it. I've heard people talking about reparations. I've even talked a little bit about reparations, but hadn't thought deeply about it, biblical. I've even had people tell me reparations isn't a gospel principle. To claim that somebody owes you something because of their sin against you, forgiveness is enough. But the question is,
now let me just mention something that someone would owe you something because of their sins against you. That's not what we're talking about here. That's not what reparations is. That's not what the trillions of dollars that everyone says. Various groups have come out and.
Now, real quick, you're probably going to see me pause this one up a lot and talk over it. So right off the top, no, that's exactly what Eric Mason is talking about. Now, again, I don't agree with everything Eric Mason says, not in any way, shape, or form. Right? I agree with some of it. I don't agree with everything James White says in any way, shape, or form. I agree with some of it. Right? I eat the meat and spit out the bones all day with people. Right? However, what I try not to do is I try not to frame somebody's argument in a way that they don't frame it themselves. And so Eric Mason is framing the argument about a sin happening, right? In that concept, right? And so James White was like, no, that's not what we're talking about. No, that's what Eric Mason is talking about. That's what he's saying. So right off the top, you're not listening with an open ear. You're hand waving right off the top. When I see people hand wave, so I'm a debater. I've had over 30 debates in the last 2 years on the clock, on video, right? When I see people hand wave, then I know you're not dealing with me in what they call in good faith. You're not being sincere, right? Or you're sincerely mishearing what's happening. Either or, they typically tend to happen off of being triggered off of something, right? So immediately I'm asking the question, why is my man talking about reparations triggering for you? What's going on with that? That doesn't even make sense to me. Like when Japanese people got reparations for being put in internment camps in America, was that an issue for the Christian church? I don't remember that. When Jews got reparations from around the world for the Holocaust, was that an issue for the Christian church? I don't remember that. When Native Americans get cut a check every year, you know what I'm saying, to get medical services, etc., whatnot. When they get kickbacks from casinos, is that an issue for the Christian church? I wasn't aware of that. When they get when they can go to certain colleges for free, is that an issue for Christian churches? I wasn't aware of that. If it is and I'm missing out, please someone link me up with the history of this joint, because I'm not aware of it. I missed that class. I might have been skipping that day. I don't know, but please catch me up on it. I'm gonna rewind this right quick. Please don't miss out on how Eric Mason is framing this. Again, I don't agree with everything Eric Mason says, right? But at the same point in time, as somebody who understands rhetoric and whatnot, I want you to see how instantaneously the framing gets switched.
said, well, if it was to be.
If I'm honest about, reparations over the years, I haven't thought a lot about it as much as I would have liked to, as one of the outworkings of what it looks like to kind of fix things and deal with some of the racial tensions in our country. I started thinking about it a few years back when I was asked to speak on it. I've heard people talking about reparations. I've even talked a little bit about reparations, but hadn't thought deeply about it, biblical. I've even had people tell me reparations isn't a gospel principle. To claim that somebody owes you something because of their sin against you, forgiveness is enough. But the question is,
now let me just mention something that someone would owe you something because of their sins against you. That's not what we're talking about here. That's not what reparations is. That's not what the trillions of dollars that everyone says. Various groups have come out and said, well, if it was to be really just, then we'd have to give $55 million to every black person in America today, and so on and so forth. That's not what he just said. Oh, that's not about. I have not sinned against Eric Mason. I do not owe Eric Mason any money. Okay, my children do not. My children's children do not, and his children do not owe me anything either. In fact, from a Christian perspective, the only thing we owe each other is to love each other and to not put each other under undue burdens. But it is interesting that he said this is, if you define it that way, it's on a personal one-to-one level, not something about something that happened that may or may not have involved your ancestors a century and a half ago. That's what the cultural definition is now. And when he gets to it, I'm not going to take time to go into it, but he was basically saying that all black Christians, that black Christian colleges should be funded for free for 200 years. That all black Christians who want to get a Christian education.
So real quick, right there, I'm going to rewind this a little bit when I'm done saying this, but right there, he did two things. One, he said, no, we're not talking about this as a sin concept. And it says culturally, that's not what reparations means and whatnot. So again, he's not even dealing with the concept of what Eric Mason is saying right there. But then he admits that Eric Mason isn't even using the cultural concept, because in Eric Mason's concept, he's talking about black Christians getting college paid for 200 years. That's nowhere in like the HR 40 concept, nowhere in the ADOS concept, nowhere in the mainstream concept of what reparations are. Is black Christians getting college for 200 years. No. And that's what I'm saying. Like, that makes no sense to me. Like, that's dangerous rhetoric. Like, what's the point of that? What's the point of that? And again, like, I'm going to let this play, but I'm going to bring it, like, I'm going to let plant this seed here. Like, so again, so Jeff Durbin is heavily involved with a group, and I'll show them called End Abortion Now, right? To where, again, Christians are dealing with this concept of abortion as it's a national sin that the country will get judged for. But when Eric Mason talks about slavery being a sin, that's not a sin that the nation can get judged for based upon the rhetoric that James White is talking about. And then he even tried to reduce it. He's like, oh, well, you're saying a one-to-one basis. A one-to-one basis. Now, abortion is a one-to-one concept. But they're saying that, no, the nation can get judged for the one-to-one thing on abortion, but not for slavery. Like, that's dangerous rhetoric. And if it's meant on purpose, it's extremely dangerous. If it's meant in ignorance, it's even more dangerous. It's even more dangerous. But I digress. I'm going to rewind this just a little bit.
But he was basically saying that all black Christians, that black Christian colleges should be funded for free for 200 years. That all black Christians who want to get a Christian education, everybody else should pay for their education for 200 years. Those are some of the things he said. Black churches funded. We all get, all the rest of us get to fund their churches. this creates such an incredible division. It's astonishing when you really think about what it actually means and how it would be played out. But everything we're hearing today, when you think about it, how it would actually be done. I mean, literally, it's astonishing that we are seeing articles being published about major institutions resegregating, this time voluntarily, resegregating, dividing along ethnic lines, and not just black-white. There's this really strange underlying black-Asian division, and Hispanic for that matter. It is interesting to note, I suppose, if your economic status is supposed to mean something, whites don't make the most money. They don't. Asians do, by a long shot. It's primarily due to discipline. It's a matter of discipline. It's if you're willing to put off fulfillment of your desires and wants.
So we basically just heard, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, even if you don't have boots. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. If you don't have boots to pull yourself up by, hey, just work harder. Just work harder. Again, that's either calculated tone deafness or it's ignorant tone deafness. I'll let you be the judge. Either or, it's tone deafness. Either or.
You can make a lot of money in this world. You really can. And so there are some people who are raised in a culture, often very respectful culture, that are willing to do with a lot less, and hence to have more at a later point in time. But when I hear that Asians make more than whites, that just makes me happy. There's nothing in me that goes, I need some of their money. They must be putting me down. Because I have no victim. The only victim mentality I have right now is when I recognize that if you still believe in the principles that this nation was founded upon, you're going to be a victim. Because there are people in power now that are doing things. That's another issue. It just never crosses my mind to be jealous of or consider myself to be being put down, because I realize it's not a zero-sum game. Economic growth is something that results from people working together. It's not that there's just one pie, you just keep getting a smaller amount, somebody gets a bigger amount. That's just not true. That's not how it works. So anyway, I just thought it was interesting that he said that.
That's true. Does the gospel work that way? And we're going to see how that works. Is our forgiveness enough in relation to our relationship with God? Does God call for any type of anything that not is a requirement for salvation, but an outworking of salvation?
Now, okay, that's an important distinction. Requirement for salvation versus an outworking of salvation. Okay.
Hey, real quick. So we're talking about like faith without works is dead, that kind of concept, right? But I want to backtrack just a little bit. Like, so he's talking about the fact that even the discussing reparations is drawing lines in the sand. Like it's dividing the church, talking about reparations. What? Now, again, he keeps talking about it through the lens of through this cultural concept of reparations costing trillions of dollars. But again, that's not what Eric Mason is saying in this concept, right? Again, he literally just addressed that. Eric Mason is talking about something even different. From his own mouth, he addressed the concept, right? So why is it drawing a line in the sand to hear the conversation? Why is it drawing divisions to hear the conversation? And what's interesting about this is he's saying pull yourself up by your bootstraps in a sense, right? Just today, James White did a video where he acknowledged that Tulsa, Oklahoma was an injustice. The fact that the people in Tulsa were able to gather together to build Black Wall Street, and that it got destroyed or whatnot, that was an injustice, but never acknowledged that it needed to be addressed in any way, shape, or form. He even brought it up in the same breath as the Japanese internment camps. But the Japanese, again, I live in Washington State. We have the largest population to my recollection, we have the largest population of like the Japanese internment people, like the descendants in the country, right? We have museums, we have monuments, all that kind of stuff up here, right? Okay, they receive reparations for that, right? Did they get enough? Probably not. But did they receive something? Yeah, 100%. So did the descendants of Black Wall Street receive reparations? No. Again, like wherever the injustice is brought up, there's no like, well, we got to deal with that. And that's exactly what Eric Mason is talking about. Listen to what Eric Mason is saying here, right? When he's talking about it being an outworking of salvation, talking about the concept, again, faith without works is dead. And again, I don't have to agree with everything that Eric Mason says to agree with what he's saying here.
I was given a book recently when I was in Arkansas, The Root and the Fruit, I think. I think it was Beakey and Lawson on Paul and James 2. I still think one of the most important chapters I've ever written is my chapter on James 2 and Paul in The God Who Justifies, which is a fairly lengthy chapter, too. I'm not sure if it was typeset in the same way, if it wouldn't be as long as the booklet I was referring to. But, okay, I get that part, but I'm really concerned where Eric Mason goes with some of the comments he makes here.
But one of the things that we want to do and that we want to begin to dig into today is this idea of a case for reparations. If you see me peek over to the side, I'm just looking and just seeing what's going on, because you know we out here, and so
yeah. And might I point out that being out there, who are you afraid of? Properly, I mean, security is important. I'm not downplaying that for a second, but could I just point something out to you? That every single number that is reported by anybody that's indisputed is you're probably not afraid of white cops. That's not who you have to be worried about. Anyway,
when you look at history, you'll hear people like Dick Gregory and others, and particularly the conscious community.
So I can't even not comment on that, right? Like, so I got family in Maryland, right? And I used to take trips out to the East Coast during the summertime, and we would have family reunions in different parts of the country, and whatnot. And I used to flip out when we go to Maryland, because Maryland was a trip. It was just a whole nother universe, right? Seeing DC, going outside DC, seeing what the city looks like right outside the city limits and whatnot, going to certain spots to where like again, like it tripped me out. Okay. So I grew up in a situation like I was talking about a Hilltop, and went out to where like, okay, there's like bars on a whole bunch of stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, so when I went to DC, I wasn't expecting to see that kind of a concept, right? When I went to Baltimore, I was like, yo, okay, like another universe, right? Like I'm looking in my mind, I'm looking at like Hilltop times a million, right? It's just a real big hilltop to me, right? I'm like, yo, okay, I already know what that is, right? So for anybody who lives in them type of situations, you understand it's a heavily government regulated situation. And again, this concept of critical race theory comes into play in terms of just being part of the conversation. Again, you don't have to agree with it to discuss the concept, right? But in these heavily government regulated areas and whatnot, again, the suburb, like Jeff Durbin is not living in an area to where, and James White aren't living in a neighborhood that are as regulated as these neighborhoods, right? They're not. They didn't grow up in areas where it said gun-free zone everywhere, right? Which means that the only people who get to have guns are the criminals or whatnot, right? They didn't grow up like that. They didn't grow up in a situation okay, like Baltimore. He out of all the cities you're gonna talk about police brutality, you're gonna talk about Baltimore. Baltimore. Do I need to go into the press clippings about the police brutality in Baltimore? Like, no, I don't. And the fact that if I had I would have to is the whole issue. Like, so my man Eric Mason is out there in the streets in Baltimore, right? where people like Jeff Durbin and James White would never ever set foot, and definitely not without security, like your man's talking about, right? But he's out there speaking his truth, talking about reparations in the Bible, etc., whatnot, right? And why is it wrong for him to speak about that? You know what I'm saying? Out there in an area that's downtrodden based upon what he's talking about in his book. Now, again, I don't agree with everything the man says, but I can't knock the fact that he's being true to form here, right? He's not outside of the framework that he's speaking of. And watch how James White reacts. He's like, he says like, oh, talking about reparations, oh, that'll protect you. Like, yo, that's a cold piece. Like, so you know what? I'm not gonna comment on that one because I can't even think of a nice way to comment on that. You know what I'm saying? Like, and this is Sal's platform, so I'm gonna leave that one alone. But yeah, I'm gonna let this run out right quick.
Tell them I'm talking about reparations for black people. Yeah, and so
Let's catch that. So obviously, someone's like, tell him, you know, what's he talking about? Talking about reparations for black people. Well, that'll keep you safe. That'll keep you safe. But the point was, what did he start off by saying? I haven't really thought much about this. It's sort of a new thing to me. No, okay, all right. So we move forward to this section here.
Correcting the effects of sin on others is a strong fruit of conversion. Well, you see, we're here in this text, and this text has kind of been that mentioning passage, if you will, that's usually mentioned in relation to reparations. We'll peruse the exegetical pantheon, as I told you, and begin to work through redemptive historical history and see if the principle that we see in this text is something that scoured the scriptures. And so when you look in verse 19, it says he entered Jericho, talking about Jesus. It's interesting that he would enter Jericho. This Jericho is not.
Okay, but notice, initiating, correcting the effects of sin on others is a strong fruit of conversion. So he's going to make the argument, the reparations. Well, you heard what he said in the after the sermon, the next day. This demonic darkness of anyone who would be questioning in the evangelical world what he was saying in the sermon. It's demonic darkness. Not see that the plagues were protests and things like that. By the way, I personally take it for what it's worth, but I see, it seems to me like he's moved a good bit away from where he was even when he wrote the book. Even in just over the past, it seems like everyone, the explosion is just ongoing, and people are getting farther and farther and farther away. And again, I say this partly in the context of the fact that, 12 years ago, most of us were speaking at the same conferences. We were sharing dinners together, and this was not being discussed by anybody within the Reformed world. This is and so go back 12 years, listen to the conferences we were.
So this is where you got James White talking about the Reformed world, i.e. Calvinism, etc., whatnot. And he's stipulating that, yeah, we don't, like, going back 12 years, no one's talking about this. This ain't even on the radar. Not even on the radar. And he says it in such a way like, well, it's a new thing. So obviously, it's almost as if he's saying because you're talking about something we weren't talking about and it's a new conversation, like it can't be correct. If we weren't talking about it, it wasn't a correct conversation to have. If we weren't bringing it up 12 years ago, you shouldn't be talking about it now. That's so telling to me. So the question returned fire is like, so why weren't you talking about it 12 years ago? Slavery ended a long time ago. Tulsa, Oklahoma. Again, my man brings that up today on his own channel. Says it's an injustice, as Eric Sermon mentions in his first chapter, right? In his book, Woke Church. But no solution given to it, and not even an acknowledgement that it needs to be dealt with. It's just an injustice. It just, oh well. Things happen. Work hard. Again, I'm not saying don't work hard. But for instance, so in the Bible, man stealing is a sin. Man stealing is a sin. And selling people like that, chattel slavery is a sin in the Bible. One more time, chattel slavery is a sin in the Bible. And being a Christian and talking about slavery as if the Catholic Church didn't sanction slavery, right? With papal bulls, like it wasn't a state enacted movement, i.e., again, institutional discrimination, right? Again, this is what doesn't make sense to me. If you talk to someone who says that again, you don't have to agree with every concept of the critical race concept, right? Critical race theory. But at the same point in time, if you're telling me institutional discrimination does not have the ability to exist, I'm going to say you're insane and point you directly towards the transatlantic slave trade. Because but for the papal bulls signed by the Pope reducing certain people in North and West Africa to perpetual servitude, there would be no transatlantic slave trade. If that's not targeted, institutional, state-sponsored discrimination and racism, I don't know what is. I literally don't know what is. Now, again, America can pay and can be judged for abortion. But it cannot be judged for slavery via this rhetoric. This doesn't make any sense to me. And I'll tell you right now, for the Europeans who are wondering why, you have people leaving your churches and joining Israelite movements, etc. Whatnot. Maybe this has something to do with it. Maybe this tone deaf rhetoric got something to do with it. It's like, so for all the so-called urban apologists who were talking about like, oh well, you know, like even the moderate Israelites are more dangerous than the one Westers. Okay, why is that? Why is that? Break that one down. Doesn't make sense to me.
We're all speaking at. Listen to what we were talking about. Listen to how we were talking about. Who's changed? Who's changed? That's something that's important. Now, this was a section that a lot of people focused upon. Right here.
Repentance. And so what we see here is a fruit of experiencing God is repentance. And look what his repentance does. He said, I'll give it to the poor, but not only that, this is not just general almsgiving. That's almsgiving, because that was general almsgiving poor. But then he goes beyond just almsgiving or offering, if you will, for kingdom work. And he said to them, to the poor, and then he says, and if I have extorted anything from anyone, I'll pay it back 4 times as much. This is interesting. It's interesting now, because now he didn't have to even say this. He could have just had his sins forgiven, and him to be able to allow his justification by faith through Christ alone to be enough for him to move on, and people believe he was different.
Now this concerned me, because Luke's not talking here about justification by faith alone in Christ alone. That this isn't Romans 3 and 4. That's not what the story is specifically talking about. Again, Zacchaeus isn't even the center of the story about what is being talked about by Luke. That's obvious. It's the Son of Man coming to seek and save that which was lost. But what you're hearing here is, well, he could have, and then you throw out justification by faith, but he did more than that. So justification by faith isn't enough. It might be enough to save you, but if you're really, really saved, then you're going to do this reparations thing. This is what really concerns me in what is being said, because there are others that are significantly less restrained.
So I'm going to let this play through. Hold on, let me play it for a couple more seconds before I comment.
Than Eric Mason in how they're presenting these particular things.
Okay, so again, so one more time, he just admitted that Eric Mason is presenting things different than another group of people, right? But so he's admitting to framing this whole conversation in a manner that's not what they call in good faith when we're having rhetorical conversations and whatnot, right? And so I want that to be clear. But second of all, hold on, I lost it. Let me hear it one more time.
You throw out justification by faith, but he did more than that. So justification by faith isn't enough. It might be enough to save you, but if you're really, really saved, then you're going to do this reparations thing. This is what really concerns me.
So my man's concerned by saying, like, if you feel the unction internally that whatever happened was wrong and should be dealt with, and that you should do something about it. That's concerning to the man. Hold on, real quick. Shout out to Sister E joining the panel. How you doing, sis? Shalom, sis. I believe, is this your first time on Debate Talk for you or no? You can go ahead and unmute your mic.
I'm sorry, my phone dropped right when you said my name. That is too funny. I'm listening. What's going on with you, Orthodox? Moor, how are you doing?
Oh, all is well. Nice to talk to you. Nice to meet you. You know what I'm saying? Is this your first time on Debate Talk for you or no?
Yeah, it's actually my first time.
Yeah.
My very first time on Debate Talk.
So I noticed you were involved in a lot of conversations concerning like the woke church, Jeff Durbin, Brother Barin, Vocab Malone, James, all this type of stuff, right? Eric Mason, all this type of stuff. What's in a short breath, what's your take on this rhetoric coming out of the Evangelical church right now?
Hold on, I have to come back in. I'm having issues with my phone.
No worries at all. So I'm gonna let this play on through while the sister's she probably driving around and doesn't have good reception where she's at, you know what I'm saying? So no worries about that.
In what is being said, because there are others that are significantly less restrained than Eric Mason in how they're presenting these particular things. A couple more here. Here's the part that we've already heard about.
5. Exodus 12:35, it says, the Israelites. This is one of my favorite passages on restitution right here. I love this joint right here. It says, the Israelites acted on Moses' word and asked the Egyptians for silver. So they said, hey, so is it wrong to ask for reparations? I heard a preacher last week say, you shouldn't be asking for nothing. You should just stay in your state that you're in. You shouldn't do, but they said, Moses told them, y'all go ask them for some money. Go ahead. I ain't prosperity gospel, but I do believe, but that doesn't take money out the Bible. It's in there. Amen. Amen. He says, go ask for silver and gold items and for clothing. Hallelujah. He wants them to look good too. Look at that. They got clothing, gear, outfits. You know what I'm saying? Fabrics and things, right? And it says, and the Lord gave the people such favor with the Egyptians that they gave them what they requested. Now, I'm going to give you something this for free.
Okay, hold on. But in this way, they plundered the Egyptians. This wasn't reparations. This is plundering. Okay, look, Egypt has just been through the plagues. Okay, locusts, frogs, darkness, and now all the firstborn are dead. Okay, it's almost been 2020. This is Egypt's 2020. Okay, they've had boils on their bodies. The water has been turned to blood. Okay, it's not been a good time. And so they're happy to see Israel go. Yes, the Israelite workers have helped to build stuff, but it's been primarily for the pharaohs and stuff, bricks for the cities and the pyramids and things like that. Sure, the average Egyptian has benefited from their labor, but there's nothing about that here. It says And Yahweh gave the people such favor with the Egyptians that they gave them what they requested.
So I'm gonna leave right there for a quick second and just say again, the Most High wasn't against the money coming to the people in any way, shape, or form. Hence, He gave them favor to do such, right? And again, when you listen to the argument that James White is making, he's saying that the nation of Egypt got judged all day long, got judged 100%, and they were judged because of sin, etc., whatnot, right? But it had nothing to do with the enslavement of the Israelites. And with that, I see Sister E back. Oh, she jumped out again. Haha, so we're back with playing it again. Go ahead.
What they requested. This isn't reparations. This is plundering. A supernatural plundering. I mean, it's just for God to do this. But if you don't see that all of this, everything that happened with Egypt and the plagues, we're going to look at this.
Hey, let me ask you real quick while you might have some good service. What's your quick breath on the rhetoric coming out of the evangelical church, and do you feel that it's like purposely tone deaf or ignorantly tone deaf?
It's a combination of both. And hey, y'all, I am so sorry. You mentioned Baltimore, and what's so funny is Orthodox Moor. I'm headed into Baltimore, but can you hear me fine?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the thing is this, I think it's a combination of both. I was listening to this guy, I think his name is Bo Sanders. I think that's his name. And he was talking about how evangelicals, they psychologically shut down to anything dealing with social injustice or social issues because that's just not their lane. They cut themselves off from society, that they don't understand what's going on in society. Now this has come up, they don't know how to handle it. So I think it's a little bit of both. Also, you're dealing with long lineage of racism and fear, because the biggest fear is the very people that you all mistreated are going to be the ones that actually be able to stand, and God stand for them. Because there's a lot of accountability when you're dealing with white evangelicalism, because you got to think about the slave trade. Who were some of the people that bought the slaves? Who made money off of slavery? Who made money off of Jim Crow redlining? Who made the money? We didn't make the money. Who got mistreated? By who? So that's the biggest fear, because you still have to deal with your sins of your forefathers. God never just dealt with just one generation. He dealt with multiple generations when it was a sin upon one father. And get that. They forget that the Bible didn't deal. God is bigger than just my generation. We have to deal with the sins of our ancestors. But now all of a sudden that doesn't exist. It's all over with. Let's not talk about it. Let's let it go. That's not even biblical. But it's the fear of, if I have to deal with it, will I lose my power? Will I lose my position? Because white evangelicalism got a lot of money. A whole lot of money. And if they ever lost their position and their power, they would lose that wealth that they have gained from generation. Because you got to think about it, generational wealth. Where did you get this money from? And then, not to mention, James White loves to talk about the fact that he is Irish. Your ancestors benefited off of the labor of my ancestors. Let's not forget about that. Some of the overseers were Irish. So I think overall, the white evangelicalism, they're afraid because that generational wealth is out the door. Because you have the wealth of their ancestors that made money off my ancestors. So that's my point.
So people like James White, who have dealt with the Israelite community, whatnot, do you feel like they're afraid of people like Brother Barin connecting themselves with the Israelite community, and for instance making like this mixed multitude that Eric Mason's even talking about, who ended up getting reparations, or what he's calling reparations in the Exodus concept, right? Does that make sense? I hope that question makes sense.
That makes sense. I see what you're saying. Are you saying they have fear of us coming in?
Are they afraid of like black Christians from the church linking up with the Israelite community, being the fact that that people like Eric Mason obviously feel like the the European evangelical community is not hearing any plight coming from the justices of our community and whatnot. So he wrote a book doing his thing, right? But we see people like Bryn who are willing to reach out to the Israelite community as well and link up. Like, okay, like I feel like we got a commonality in this. Do you know what I'm saying? Do you think there's a fear in the evangelical community about that?
Correct, it is, because the thing is, Israelite community, just like in the Christian community, there's diversity even in our community. We live, when you look at our lives, we're simple people. We live simple lives. We work with you. We might sit right next to you and do a job. Because we call ourselves Israel, we're not out here spewing hateful rhetoric. We're talking about the word of God and accountability, but we're not spewing any type of racial, hate towards anybody. We're talking about the sins of the past and how to deal with the sins of the past, and how we even had to deal with the sins of our past through our ancestors. But that's the biggest fear. They don't want the face to change, and the face has changed, and that's the biggest fear.
Now here's my complicated question. So why do you think people like Eric Mason don't go the Berean route, in the sense to where, okay, if the evangelical church is basically saying, if the European evangelical church is basically saying, okay, Israelites, nah, we're not cool with you. The black church, we're gonna label you like BLM Marxist and whatnot, and we're just gonna like put you to the side or whatnot, right? We're gonna say, if you're talking about reparations, nah, that's not biblical, etc. whatnot, right? Like, so why do you think people or what is it that you think keeps people like Eric Mason from connecting with the Israelite community and being able to build, and not recognizing that he's a black sheep in his own evangelical community? Oh, the sister dropped off. But I'll leave that question for the chat, you know what I'm saying? Because I think that's what's interesting to me is that I see people like Eric Mason taking shots all day from Christians right now. And what's interesting is the people who are coming to his defense most are people that are in the Israelite community that Eric Mason would kind of go at. So yeah, I find that to be extremely interesting. But I'm gonna play this a little bit more because I know the sister had to drop off right quick. Matter of fact, I'm not even gonna play this one. I'm gonna play a whole nother one, because I want to show something right quick. Oh, was this the one? I forgot the one. I'm gonna play this one, but this isn't the one I was looking for. But everyone knows that James White got caught up for talking about the black church not being intellectual and not knowing anything about church history, and not valuing church history, and not valuing intellectual study and all that type of stuff, right? And what I find intriguing is when Eric Mason is talking about the black church having schools funded for 200 years via the Reparation Council, he's like, no, can't do that. And I feel like it's tied to rhetoric like this here, so I'm going to play this. Oh, I forgot to do it again. That's strike 3. I'm out. Share audio. There we go. Share audio. Bam. Okay. And share.
So, an ethnic Gnostic is a person who basically says that you cannot address the experience of an ethnic group without walking in their shoes. In other words, outsiders need not comment. You have to have a certain melanin count in your skin. Melanin is what gives us the tone of our skin. It's actually a really, really cool God-designed sunscreen, is what it is. I'm not getting into intelligent design, but it's part of intelligent design. Anyway, which is why the pasty white-skinned people of Scandinavia or Northern Ireland don't have a lot of it, because they rarely see that ball in the sky. And the people who live at the equator have got a lot of it, because they see it every day, all day long. It's part of how God designed us. And it has absolutely, positively, nothing to do with the commandments of God. Nothing. Nothing. Show me somewhere in the Bible when Paul wrote to slaves and he said, slaves, be obedient to your masters. He says, this glorifies God. There are no textual variants in any manuscripts that have a little asterisk. Down at the bottom was a little note that said, well, unless your particular ethnic group has experienced this kind of mistreatment, and then you don't have to do this. And there's no chart that says how bad this has to have been. And so if you're in this ethnic group, then and then this ethnic group, and this ethnic group, none of that. There's nothing in Scripture when it talks about duties of husbands to wives, our duties toward God, our duties toward government and authority. Nowhere, anywhere does race come in. It's not a biblical construct. It's not a biblical construct. The ethnic Gnostic is in grave theological danger if they claim to be a Christian. Now, there are a lot of ethnic Gnostics, Christians, obviously. But when they claim to be a Christian, here's the danger. And I saw this over and over and over again. Twitter, Facebook, blog posts. The great danger is when your ethnicity, your race, your culturalism becomes the first primary lens through which you view everything else. And some people would say, there's no way to escape that. Yes, there is. Yes, there is. The first primary lens must be the scriptures, the gospel, your relationship to God, who you are as his creature. That must be the first lens. You must look at everything else, including race, secondarily, only through the gospel. If you don't do that, you're not doing it as a Christian. And if you have your culturalism, your racism as your primary lens, looking at everything else, you will end up perverting the truth. And so let's just be absolutely positively honest here. For a certain portion of you, I should not have written that because I'm MC, melanin challenged. I'm primarily Scottish, British, and German. That's an interesting mixture. Could cause all sorts of internal conflicts if I lived in light of what happened to my ancestors, but I don't. I don't know how they did it. And this is relevant, by the way. But my parents somehow instilled in me a long time ago. You stand before God on your own 2 feet. I don't blame my parents. No one's ever had perfect parents. Nobody. Jesus didn't even have perfect parents, crying out loud. Despite what the Roman Catholics say about Mary. They haven't made Joseph sinless. So anyway, no one's ever had perfect parents. I didn't have perfect parents. I was not a perfect parent to my children. But I was taught somehow very early on, and I believe it with all my heart, that I stand before God responsible for my own decisions. I don't blame my parents. And you know what? I can look back at each one of my racial groups. Man, the Scots were treated like garbage. They were enslaved. I'm not going to demand reparations. I don't think it has something to do with me today. Why does anyone think that? I don't understand it. it seems absolutely, abjectly absurd to me. To go, hey, well, you know, this happened 150 years ago, so I can live this way, or you owe me that. Not a way to live life, and it's not biblical. There's nothing in the Bible that tells you, well, you know, you should look back at what happened and live in light of that. You know what it does say to the Jewish people? Look back at God's faithfulness and live faithfully to his covenant. That's all it says. Nothing about race. Nothing about living as a lifelong victim. In fact, if we're new creatures in Christ, how could that be anyways? Does that make any sense? Anyway.
So if you are a new creature in Christ, in this belief that he's talking about, then you shouldn't be talking about any wrongs that happen to your people. Like, so if you're living in a country where your ancestors were enslaved and there's institutions that still oppress the descendants of those ancestors, and again, I'm not talking about police brutality here. I'm not talking about Black Lives Matter stuff. Although I'm going to touch on that in a second. I'm talking about, like, so for instance, like, I just turned 38 years old, right? I'm old enough to remember the realities of the 94 crime bill. My brother went to jail not too long after that crime bill hit. And he went to jail for a really long sentence. I know a lot of people that got caught up under that crime bill, right? A lot of people, man, I'm part of a generation to where, you know what I'm saying, a lot of my friends had we had our older brothers in jail together. Let me say it like that. You understand what I'm saying? We had our older brothers in jail together, right? And so did the Europeans get locked up in the time period? Yes, 100%. But we also know that there was a disproportionate concept of how certain neighborhoods were dealt with. That's institutional. Whether it's ignorant or on purpose, it's institutional. That needs to be understood. And so when a community moves and tries to move institutionally to correct those issues, that shouldn't be a problem. That should not be a problem in any way, shape, or form. But even more so, I want to get back to a couple of things here. So one, there's lines being drawn in the sand within the evangelical community, period. Within the Christian community, period. Lines being drawn in the sand. If you are a descendant of slaves in America and you're a Christian, there's certain people who believe that it would be un-Christ-like for you to deal with reparations because you should be a new creature in Christ and not worry about nothing that happened before that. You know what I'm saying? Just work hard from then on. Just work hard from then on. The work hard concept I always agree with. Don't ever stop working hard. However, this bit about you shouldn't have to worry about it. It's just no. Don't even worry about it. It's cool. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. So, for instance, you're going to put me in a school that I got to hear about my slavery for a month every year, right? And it's part of my cultural context and upbringing, but I'm not supposed to address it in any way, shape, or form. I live in a country where my people were enslaved, but I'm not supposed to think about it, deal with it, none of them type of things. Even if the residual effects of enslavement have some kind of reality in my everyday life, I'm not supposed to deal with that. So, again, those lines don't make any sense to me, because at the same point in time, you're going to tell those same people that you're drawing that line with, okay, now you need to agree with me about abortion, and we can't work with each other to deal with police. We can't deal with each other for instance, like we can't deal with each other in terms of gay marriage. We can't deal with each other in terms of like the working for to better our communities concerning like the LGBT community, the transgender concept movement in. We can't deal with changing the escalation of force policies with the police, or changing laws that make it to where you cannot sue the police if they do in fact harm individuals unduly, etc., or cause death unduly, etc. That we can't sue them. We can't work together to change those laws. It's righteous in your eyes that we should be able to live in a situation to where a cop can kill somebody no matter what color they are and get away with it legally. Those are interesting lines to draw in the sand. But on top of that, here's the thing that rang in my ear real loud. So it's a sin for this nation for abortion to happen, but slavery was not a sin. Slavery is not a sin. One more time. It's a sin. It's a sin for abortion to happen in this country that the country can catch judgment for, but the country will not catch judgment for slavery and whatnot. So for my European family in the Christian churches or whatnot, like, understand there's a reason why there's people leaving your church. There's a reason for it. There's a tone deafness coming out of your church that is not only offensive to the ears, but it's pouring salt in wounds that exist that you won't even acknowledge. That you won't even acknowledge. For my Black Christian family, right, in the church right now, you know what I'm saying? If you're standing there on some us and them stuff with the Christians and the Israelites, right, based upon rhetoric and all that kind of stuff, right, I hear you on one level, right? I can understand you want to protect where you come from and whatnot, right? But it's looking real funny when you're out there like Eric Mason, right? And the church is taking shots at you, and the only people covering you are the Israelites. And I'm going to tell you why it looks funny, or what you may not understand, right? So this is what these cats think, that we paid for the sin of slavery by electing Barack Obama. This is what the Senate Majority Leader said, right? The sin of slavery has already been taken care of. So since Barack Obama was president, there's nothing you gotta worry about ever again, right? Now, Barack Obama is not even a descendant of slaves, and nor did he do anything for the descendants of slaves like that in dealing with slavery, whatnot, or the any kind of institution left over therefrom, right? In fact, I was watching Barack Obama stall payments to Black farm owners who were awarded money through a settlement via a federal case because they were getting discriminated against in the Bush administration. Slow walked him out. But again, like, so for my people like Eric Mason out there, right? Yeah, you going on the Israelites, whatever. You going on like, yeah, whatever. We don't have to agree on everything, right? We don't have to agree on everything, right? But you have a group of people who aren't willing to work with you for anything. But you have another group of people who would be willing to work with you on what you agree on. So there's lines being drawn in the sand. I clearly see the lines. Clearly see the lines. The rhetoric is clear. The rhetoric is super clear to me. The question is, what are the people in the black church going to do? What are the righteous European evangelicals going to do? And what are the people who identify as Israelites going to do in the wake as well, right? So are they going to call out to the righteous people in the church and work with them? Are the righteous people in church going to reach out and work with them? Or are the people in the church going to stick their fingers in their ear and act like they don't hear this screeching sound of nails on the chalkboard coming out their pulpits right now? Because I'll tell you this right now, like, when I grew up in the church, I didn't hear nothing like this ever in my life. Ever in my life. But I will tell you this, in the church I grew up in, I was still made to feel out of place for ever talking about racial issues. I didn't hear anything to this level of rhetoric, right? But what I dealt with is people just having no cultural understanding of it, none whatsoever. So, am I mad at Jeff Durbin for potentially being culture ignorant? No, not at all. You can have good, righteous, ignorant people all day, right? However, I don't think he's ignorant. I don't think James White are ignorant. I think they're telling you what they actually believe. And check this out. Like, so here's James White, right? Here's a tweet from James White talking about, he's responding to somebody who mentions him, right? Watch this. There's a guy named Pastor Hodge, right? He says, I think this is I'll show you the date. This is from, I think November 29th, 2019, right? He says, I think it is intellectually lazy to limit the discussion of racism and the false ideology of white supremacy to the slavery timeline when racism extended and continued in America till this day in many shapes and forms. If Dr. White is sincere, he will advocate for reparations. This is November 29th, 2019. This is James White's response to the man. Brother, could you point me to where the apostles advocated for reparations for all of the peoples subjugated and taxed heavily by Rome? One more time. Could you point me to where the apostles advocated for reparations for all of the people subjugated and taxed heavily by Rome? So again, my man's talking about white supremacy and slavery that exists in modern shapes and forms. James White doesn't even touch on that. He touches on the reparations concept. He's like, no. Why do I? And again, he's acting like he got to pay out of his pocket, right? That he's got to pay out of his pocket. When the Japanese got paid reparations, he didn't pay for it. When the Jews got paid reparations, he didn't pay for it. And again, it doesn't have to be like a lump sum check. Again, people like Eric Mason were talking about schools getting paid for, et cetera, whatnot. So there's this deafness to the whole concept of like, yeah, like, so again, there's the acknowledgement, like there's a silent acknowledgement that the institutions exist. But then there's counter rhetoric of no, critical race theory. No. You can't talk about that. You can't even, it's a non-starter. You can't even talk about institutional racism. What? So again, I'm going to jump off because I'm just talking at this juncture, but yeah, family, this has been a very interesting week into which I'm probably going to talk more about I hope more people do. I hope more people jump on and do their own shows on the concept and whatnot, and really start to do a penetrating look at these concepts of rhetoric coming from the pulpit right now. Concepts of rhetoric coming from the pulpit, because there's lines being drawn, lines of division that are not necessary to draw, but they're being drawn on purpose. They're being drawn on purpose. So if someone's drawing a line and you're on the other side of it, what should you do? Should you cling to the people who are drawing the line and putting you on the other side of it? Or should you cling to the people who are on the same side of the line as you are? So with that, I'm going to ask my last question, leave it there. If abortion is a sin that the nation can be judged for, why isn't slavery? So with that, family, I'm going to leave y'all with a tune. Hope you enjoy your Friday evening. I know you probably got other shows to watch, other things to get into. I appreciate you spending some time with me here. Shout out to Sal and the Debate Talk For You platform. My apologies for not catching that slip. I thought I had it. It was too slow on my computer. I couldn't catch the mouse in time. But with that, I say peace and love, family.
Mm-hmm.